right, strap yourselves in because today we're going deep on a topic that tends to get people fired up. Modern gender dynamics. But we're looking at it from an angle you don't often hear. We're taking that red pill, and our guide on this journey is Conrad Reicher's The Truth About Gender, a red-pilled guide to the modern world.
Yeah, and what I found fascinating about this book is how it doesn't shy away from poking at those accepted ideas. It really digs into the unspoken realities that a lot of men, especially those who feel like they're on the outside looking in or like nobody gets it, we're dealing with right now.
Exactly, and just to make sure we're all on the same page, when we say red pill, we're going back to that Matrix analogy, right? It's like choosing to see things for what they are, no sugarcoating, no filters, even when it's not the story we're usually told to believe.
That's it. That's the heart of it. Questioning the narrative, especially when it comes to all the stuff around gender roles and what's expected of us. And Riker does not hold back. Just look at some of these chapter titles. The War on Masculinity, the hijacking of evolutionary biology. It's going to get interesting.
Okay, so let's unpack this whole red pill thing a little more.
Yeah.
If we're seeing the world through this lens, what are we actually seeing?
Well, it's about recognizing that the way we understand gender, relationships, even power, a lot of that comes from how we've been programmed by society. And sometimes that programming isn't doing us any favors, especially as men. Not in the way we're told it should, anyway.
I think a lot of guys listening right now, they know that feeling, right? Like you're picking up on things others are missing, these unspoken rules of the game nobody talks about out loud.
100%. And that's why these online communities have blown up, especially the ones centered on this red pill philosophy. It's a place where men can connect with others who've had those same experiences, who are also questioning the dominant narratives.
Right on. So let's dive into one of the big narratives that Riker takes on, this idea of a war on masculinity. What's he really saying here?
He's saying that the classic traits, the values we associate with being masculine, they're under attack. Not necessarily physically, but in the culture, in how we think about it. There's this feeling that what it means to be a man is constantly being redefined, and not in a good way a lot of the time.
And he gives some real-world examples in the book, doesn't he?
Oh, yeah, plenty. He talks about how young boys are often getting in trouble at school just for acting like boys, being rowdy or competitive. Things that were once seen as normal, now they're labeled as trouble, even toxic.
Like the rules changed, but nobody told the players.
Exactly. And that leaves men, especially young men, trying to find their place, feeling confused and frustrated.
And this feeling of being confused and frustrated, like you're being pushed to the side,
Yeah.
it seems to connect directly to the next big thing Riker tackles, the gender wage gap.
You got it. And he doesn't just parrot that line about women getting paid less for the same work. He digs deeper, looks at the details that often get ignored in these debates.
So what's his take on the wage gap then?
He's saying that discrimination is definitely real, but it's not the only thing, and maybe not even the main thing, causing this gap. He points to things like what kind of jobs men and women tend to go for. Statistically, men go for the higher paying jobs, but those often come with more risk too.
So it's not just about getting paid less for the same job, but what jobs people are choosing in the first place.
Right, and he talks about how much risk people are willing to take, how many hours they put in, even biological things like how strong you are or how much you can handle physically. Those can affect what careers you go into and ultimately how much you earn.
So he's bringing in a lot of different factors that go way beyond just discrimination.
He is, and what I like about how he approaches it is that he's not trying to pretend women don't face hurdles in the workplace. He's just saying we need to look at the whole picture, use the data, not just focus on the parts that fit a particular narrative.
It's about being honest with ourselves.
Yeah.
Even when it's uncomfortable, and being willing to question what we think we know.
Absolutely.
And speaking of questioning what we think we know, Riker doesn't shy away from one of the most hot-button topics we have, feminism.
Yeah, and he starts by giving credit where it's due. The movement, at the beginning, it had great goals, fighting for equal rights for women. That was totally needed.
No argument there. But he seems to be saying that something changed along the way.
He is. His argument is that some parts of feminism have moved away from that original goal of equality. Now it's become this more extreme ideology where it's all about demonizing masculinity and painting men as the enemy.
And he backs this up with real examples from the book, right?
Absolutely. He talks about things like pro-life women being excluded from feminist marches, or the Duluth model for dealing with domestic violence, which automatically assumes the man's always the one doing the abusing. These are just a couple of examples of how he sees this shift happening.
It's about seeing that even within a movement, you've got different groups, different ideas at play.
Exactly. And it's not like he's saying all feminists are bad or the whole movement's gone off the rails. He's just highlighting this particular strain within feminism that he thinks is harmful to both men and women.
Okay, so we've talked about this war on masculinity and how feminism's changed over time. Now let's get into another super sensitive topic that Riker goes right at, the hashtag #MeToo movement.
Here's where things get really interesting. He acknowledges the good that came from hashtag #MeToo, giving victims of sexual assault and harassment a voice, holding people accountable. But then he digs into the other side, the unintended consequences that came with it.
So what are some of those downsides he's talking about?
He talks about the danger of false accusations, of people being tried in the court of public opinion, and how the whole movement has made some men scared to even interact with women in certain situations.
And he actually brings up the Johnny Depp Amber Heard case as a prime example, right?
He does, and that case showed us just how quickly a man's life, his reputation, can be destroyed based on accusations that later turned out to be lies.
It's a reminder that, even when we're dealing with really sensitive stuff, we need to remember things like due process and innocent until proven guilty.
Right. Absolutely. While he's clearly on the side of anyone who's been abused, he's also saying we need a balanced approach, one that doesn't jump to conclusions just because someone's been accused.
Okay, so we've covered some heavy stuff here. This idea of war on masculinity, how feminism's changed, the whole hashtag #MeToo thing. But Riker doesn't stop there. He takes us even deeper down this rabbit hole with his look at evolutionary biology.
This is where he really challenges some core ideas about gender that have become super popular. He pushes back against the idea that gender is 100% a social construct, saying there are real biological differences between men and women that go way beyond just how we look.
And he's not just relying on anecdotes or personal opinions here, right? He's got scientific studies, data to back it all up.
Oh, he does. He pulls in research on how men's and women's brains are different, pointing out differences in things like spatial reasoning, how we process emotions, even how much risk we're willing to take.
And he's not saying these differences are a bad thing or something to be ashamed of.
No, not at all. What he's saying is that these differences are part of what make us who we are, men and women, and they add to the richness of the human experience.
It's about understanding those differences, not pretending they don't exist, and then using that understanding to build better relationships and a fairer society for everyone.
You got it. It's about recognizing that equality doesn't mean we're all the same. Men and women can be equal in worth and dignity while still being different in how we're wired.
So we've covered a lot of ground in this first part of our Red Pill deep dive. We've questioned some of the narratives we're often told about masculinity, looked at the complexities of feminism and hashtag #MeToo, and even gotten a little lesson on evolutionary biology. But there's still so much more to explore.
In part 2, we'll keep going through Riker's book and dive into even more thought-provoking topics like solipsism, how Marxist ideas have influenced how we view gender today, and how men's rights have been systematically dismantled.
So get ready, keep your minds open, and buckle up for the next level of this Red Pill deep dive. It's going to be a wild ride.
Welcome back to the deep dive. We just scratched the surface of some pretty thought-provoking stuff in the last part, from the challenges to traditional masculinity to how feminist thought has changed.
And trust me, we're going even deeper down the rabbit hole now. In this part, Riker takes us into some serious mind-bending territory, looking at some of the philosophical ideas behind how we understand gender today.
One of the most fascinating concepts he tackles is solipsism. Now, I know that might sound kind of out there, but stay with me here because it's got some big implications for how we look at gender relations.
Okay, I'm all ears. So break it down for me. What is solipsism and how does it relate to all of this?
Well, solipsism is basically the idea that the only thing you can be sure exists is your own mind. It's like this extreme version of reality where your own thoughts and feelings are all that matters.
So how does this philosophical idea tie into the whole red pill gender dynamics conversation?
Riker argues that this solipsistic way of thinking has become more and more common in our society, especially when we talk about gender and relationships. He uses the example of consent to illustrate this point.
Consent. We touched on that a bit when we were talking about the hashtag #MeToo movement.
Exactly. What Riker points out is that discussions around consent can get really subjective. What one person sees as harassment, someone else might see as just harmless flirting.
And he even shares a personal story in the book about a friend who got falsely accused of sexual misconduct based on someone's subjective interpretation of what happened.
Exactly. And that's the danger of solipsism, right? When we put more weight on feelings and personal interpretations of reality than we do on actual facts and evidence, things can go sideways fast.
So if we want to have any kind of productive conversation about these complex issues, we need to be on the same page about what's real, not just go off our own individual feelings.
Absolutely. It's about realizing that there's a whole world out there beyond our own feelings and experiences. And those feelings, even though they're valid, don't always show us the whole picture.
Okay, so we've talked about solipsism. Now let's move on to another topic that could get people fired up, the influence of Marxist ideology on how we talk about gender today.
This is where Riker really starts connecting some dots that I hadn't thought about before. But before anyone flicks the table, he's not saying every feminist is a Marxist or that there's some big plan to destroy capitalism.
But he is saying that some Marxist ideas have seeped into modern gender theory and activism, often in subtle, sneaky ways.
Right. He points to the concept of oppressor versus oppressed, which is at the heart of Marxist thinking. His argument is that this framework's been applied to gender relations, with men automatically being labeled as the oppressors and women as the oppressed.
And what he's suggesting is that this narrative, this story we tell ourselves, oversimplifies how complicated gender dynamics really are. It ignores the fact that men and women both have their own struggles, even if they're different.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that the world isn't split neatly into good guys and bad guys. Power dynamics are a lot more fluid and complex than this simple binary makes them seem.
So it's about moving past those simplistic labels and seeing each other as human beings, men and women both, even while acknowledging that our experiences are different.
Absolutely. It's about creating a dialogue based on mutual respect and understanding, not on demonizing an entire gender.
Okay, let's switch gears a bit and go back to a topic we touched on earlier, evolutionary biology.
Now, I have to admit, I wasn't expecting a crash course on evolution in a book about gender dynamics, but Riker makes it super interesting.
I know, right? And he uses it to really dismantle this popular idea that gender is just a social construct, a claim that's been everywhere lately.
He doesn't hold back here. He points to a ton of scientific evidence showing that there are real biological differences between men and women that go way beyond just what we look like on the outside.
He goes into detail about how men's and women's brains are literally wired differently, doesn't he?
He does. He brings up studies that show variations in how our brains are structured and how they function. And that leads to differences in things like spatial reasoning, how we deal with emotions, even how willing we are to take risks.
And what he's saying is that these differences aren't something we should be ashamed of or try to erase.
Exactly. He's suggesting that these differences are part of what makes men and women unique, and they contribute to how diverse and rich the human experience is.
It's about understanding those differences, not denying they exist, and then using that understanding to build better relationships and a more fair society for everyone.
You got it. It's about recognizing that equality doesn't have to mean being the same. Men and women can be equal in terms of their worth and dignity while still accepting that we're inherently different.
So we've covered a lot of ground here, from this philosophical idea of solipsism to the influence of Marxist thinking, from the science of evolution to all the complexities of how we understand gender today. And we're just getting started.
In our next and final segment, we're going to dive into some of the most controversial stuff in Riker's book, like his arguments about how men's rights have been systematically dismantled and how the workforce has become feminized.
It's going to be a thought-provoking ride, so buckle up and get ready to challenge some of those deep-seated assumptions you might have. Welcome back for the final part of our Red Pill deep dive into Conrad Riker's The Truth About Gender.
We've been through some heavy stuff, questioning the usual narratives, exploring those biological differences, even looking at how Marxist ideas have shaped gender theory.
And now we're getting into what might be the most sensitive area of all, Riker's argument about the systematic dismantling of men's rights.
This is where the book really hits a nerve. He argues that men are facing some real disadvantages, even discrimination in different parts of life, and these issues often get swept under the rug.
One area he really focuses on is family law. What's his take on how men are treated by the legal system, especially when it comes to things like divorce and custody battles?
Well, he brings up statistics that show men are way less likely to get custody of their kids when couples split up. And his argument is that it's not just about individual judges being biased, it's like there's a bias built into the whole legal system itself.
It was like the deck is stacked against fathers in these custody cases, no matter what the specific situation is.
That's what Riker's saying. And he doesn't stop there. He looks at the financial side of divorce too, pointing out how alimony payments can really cripple a man financially, even if both spouses worked and contributed equally during the marriage.
So it's not just the emotional pain of losing custody, but also the financial hit that men often take after a divorce.
Exactly. And Riker's point is that these financial burdens can have a ripple effect, making it harder for men to get back on their feet and even stay connected with their kids.
He also brings up the issue of conscription, how in many countries men have to register for military service, but women don't. What's he getting at there?
He sees it as another example of how society puts different expectations on men and women, especially when it comes to things like duty and sacrifice. It's like there's this unspoken assumption that men are the ones who are supposed to put themselves on the line, both literally on the battlefield and in other ways too.
This idea that men are seen as more expendable, that connects with a lot of the other things we've talked about, doesn't it?
For sure. It goes back to that war on masculinity idea, this feeling that the classic traits of being a man are being looked down on, and that men are constantly being told they need to be more sensitive, less assertive, more willing to just go with the flow.
While those qualities can be good things, Riker seems to be saying that we've gone too far in that direction, so far that it's actually hurting men.
Right, that's his point. He's not saying we need to go back to some old school patriarchal system. He's just pointing out these imbalances that have popped up and calling for a more nuanced understanding of what men are going through.
It's about realizing that true equality means respecting the rights and needs of both men and women, not just one at the expense of the other.
Exactly. And it's about having those tough conversations, even when they're uncomfortable, about the real challenges men are facing in today's world.
Now, Riker doesn't just stop at looking at the legal and social systems that he thinks are putting men at a disadvantage. He also gets into female psychology, specifically this concept of hypergamy.
Okay, this is where things get really interesting. Riker connects evolutionary biology with how relationships work today, exploring how women's natural preferences have shaped mating patterns throughout history.
So, hypergamy, if I'm understanding this right, is basically the idea that women are drawn to men who have higher status or social standing.
That's the gist of it. And Riker argues that it's not just a cultural thing, it's a biological drive that's been ingrained in women over thousands of years of evolution.
So it's not about women being shallow or only caring about money. It's about understanding these deep-seated evolutionary forces that are at play in how humans behave.
Exactly. His argument is that these drives are still very much alive in today's world, even if we're not always aware of them.
And how does this all tie back into the bigger picture of men's rights and the struggles they're dealing with?
Well, Riker suggests that hypergamy is a big factor in everything from how people date and how relationships work, to the careers people choose, and even the stories we tell ourselves about gender. He says that men are often judged and valued based on whether they can meet these hypergamous preferences that women have.
So it's not just about individual women making choices, it's about the pressure society puts on men to be successful and achieve a certain status so they can be seen as desirable partners.
Exactly. And Riker says that this pressure can be really intense and can make men feel inadequate and frustrated, especially the ones who are struggling to meet those expectations.
Wow, this has been quite a journey unpacking some really complex and challenging ideas. What are your final thoughts on the truth about gender?
I see this book as a call to action, you know? It challenges us to look beyond the surface and question those narratives we're often told to just accept without thinking. It's about realizing that this conversation about gender is way more complicated than most people realize.
Riker's book has definitely given us a lot to think about. And whether you agree with everything he says or not, I think it's important to engage with these ideas and have open and honest conversations about the issues that both men and women are facing today.
If you're interested in exploring these ideas further, you can find The Truth About Gender on Amazon Kindle and Google Play Books. It's a thought-provoking read that will challenge your assumptions and maybe even change how you see the world.
Until next time, keep those minds open and keep diving deep.